The complex features of the biological world are on display every day. How could these features have developed in a step-by-step manner over long periods of time? During this program, we'll examine some powerful details revealing the wonderful intricacy of God's creative power. Coming up on today's edition of Origins, Incredible Features Part 2 with Bruce Malone. Hello and welcome to Origins. I'm Ray Heiple. It's an honor to be your host today. During this program, we showcase interesting guests who present evidence from science, along with other important facts validating the truth of creation and the accuracy of the Bible. Today's guest, Bruce Malone, has a degree in chemical engineering with 27 years' experience as a research leader. In 2008, he became the executive director of Search for the Truth Ministries. This organization distributes Bible-affirming creation materials to students and prisoners internationally, giving away hundreds of thousands. Bruce speaks on the scientific evidence supporting creation at schools and churches around the world and has authored 7 books on this subject. Welcome to the program, Bruce.
No place I'd rather be, Ray.
We are so glad to have you. We are going to be looking at incredible features. What does that mean?
Well, there's 2 primary ways God makes His presence known in our life. One is through Scripture and also that internal moral code He built into us. But because we're fallen, we can just ignore all that, and He gives us the freedom to do so. But it's His creation that literally you can't ignore because it's all around us. We see it, we hear it, we feel it, and we know it's there.
So how does the creation show us that God exists?
There are great big fish living in the ocean who love to eat little fish. But when they do so, they get hunks of meat stuck in their teeth. That will eventually rot out their teeth, and it's not a healthy thing for them to have happen.
It seems like if they lose their teeth, they lose the ability to eat, they die.
They've got problems, okay? So what has God done to solve this problem? He built into 2 completely different species of fish the instinct to allow the little fish to come inside the big fish's mouth, and it then eats all the little bits of leftover food. Here's this fish swimming inside of this other fish's mouth. They'll actually line up at a cleaning station and wait in line for the little fish to come clean their teeth or their gills.
And the little fish knows it's not going to get eaten, and the big fish is not going to eat it.
Imagine, how does evolution do this? You've got a big fish that's got a toothache, and this little fish sees some tasty morsel inside the big fish's mouth, and it says, oh, I think I'll just go swim up to this fish that just ate my brother and clean his teeth. What's going to happen? He's going to get eaten. You can't explain it by an evolutionary process.
That's amazing.
Oh, and then here you've got a moray eel, and you have a shrimp that crawls up. By the way, he loves to eat shrimp, one of his favorite foods. But somehow the eel and the shrimp know at a certain time in a certain place, he can crawl into the eel's mouth and clean his teeth and not get eaten.
Well, if you're a shrimp, then you want to be that one that's there at that time.
You don't want to be the first. But they know.
But they know.
God programmed them. Instincts are programming language to allow them both to do this so both benefit and both survive. Here's a bird that crawls inside of a crocodile's mouth.
Now, I've seen this before on videos or so forth.
But how did they know? How could that have evolved? How could a step change at a time have had that happen? Both benefit, but they're programmed to do that. Last example, sharks, who you would think would eat everything.
That's what we seem to see on television anyway.
And yet they allow their prey, the food they would normally eat, to get in there and clean their teeth, but only in a certain place, and it's that certain kind of fish. They'll eat them at other times.
And again, the point is that both of these creatures need the other creature in order for themselves to survive.
They do. One last example, completely different part. Now here we have a plant that in order to survive has to have a certain size instinct which will come and crawl into the plant in order to get pollen, but as it does so, the pollen hanging on these two little membranes will rub the back of the insect, deposit that pollen, which it will then go to another flower, it's an orchid, and then pollinate that orchid. It's designed exactly the size, exactly the shape, and exactly the color to not only allow the pollen, but attract, and guess what it's going to attract?
A bee.
A bumblebee. It is colored, shaped, and sized. It even has little things that look like wings to attract the bee. But not only that, it sends out pheromones that smell like a female bee. So the bee smells the smell that smells and looks like a female, and it goes in there to try to mate.
So Bruce, if there's no bees in existence, then all of the stuff that this flower is doing makes no sense whatsoever.
No sense whatsoever. And how does a flower to know
that
to
there's
look
a bee
like a
out
bee?
there? Yeah, how does it know there's a bee out there?
Imagine a perfume chemist, how many thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of different chemicals it has to go through in order to get a really good smell. How in the world did it come up with the smell of a female bee? It's all designed. It's like God does these things, so we are without excuse. We can't claim to be an atheist and have an open mind seeking truth.
We couldn't even imitate this with all of our abilities and our knowledge and our technology, and yet we say, at least science says, or secular science says, this is all just random.
And it's not that these people are stupid. It's not even that most scientists that believe in evolution are out to deceive. They've been trained to think in a certain way. Evolution's a fact, millions of years, slow change. It's the framework through which they will then filter everything. They'll look at that flower and they'll say, wow, look how useful that is. Evolution must have made it. But they're not thinking through what in the world could have been the process to change an orchid into didn't look like a bee and smell like a bee into an orchid that did. And it just couldn't happen a step of change at a time.
It's almost like they put on these goggles and they won't allow themselves to come up with any other answers. It has to be within this framework of evolution, random chance, Darwinian evolution, and then find a way to explain it.
And it's because if you leave the truth out, if you leave the Bible, if you leave God out of your thinking, you got to come up with something. And once that's locked into your brain, you literally start to become blind to what is the truth.
Seems to me you leave what's intelligent and you become foolish.
It's not a matter of intelligence, it's a matter of how you're training your brain to think. Let's look at some other examples. We're going to look now at kind of what I call survival mechanisms. Complex structures, but they're really useful for disguising an animal or helping it defend itself, because once mankind rebelled against God, death was brought in as a penalty so we wouldn't live forever separated from Him. And it wasn't just us, it was the entire animal kingdom. The entire creation fell because of what we did. Death is our cause, the result of our actions. But God in His mercy built a creation that either had the variety and flexibility to adapt, or he created the ability to adapt and defend after the fall. Let's look at a few of these. Now this is a huge moth. It's called the Atlas moth. You can see the man's hand behind it. And one of the predators of the moth are birds. They love to eat moths. And at night would be bats. But what eats bats and birds? Well, one of those main predators near the ground where the moth lives are snakes, especially in tropical regions. So if you look closely at this moth, you'll see at the edge of its wings, it's got this funny coloration thing. Here's a cobra that says, oh, I like to eat birds, and birds like to eat moths. Look what is at the end of the wing of this moth. Just take a close look at that.
Well, you don't even have to look close. Immediately you see two snake heads there.
You see two snake heads. Birds also look at that moth. They see two snake heads. What do you think they do? They fly the other direction. So the moth doesn't get eaten by the birds. Now, did the moth one day think, oh, I bet if I made my wings to look like a snake's head, the birds wouldn't eat me? Or did evolution say, oh, I'll just Accidentally, there'll be a moth born and it'll have something that looks a little bit more like a snakehead. Well, it wouldn't do any good at all. It wouldn't protect the moth if it didn't look exactly like a snakehead. Birds aren't stupid.
So those moths that are starting, if, again, evolution is true, there's just a little bit starting to look like a snake, they're getting eaten, they're getting eaten, they're getting eaten.
They're still getting eaten. Why would it continue?
Until it actually looks like a snake, and then it's too late.
And if you throw paint spatters on a wall, it's not going to start looking like a snakehead. And that's all evolution has, random changes, paint splatters on a wall. So these are designed. This is a design by the Creator to allow two animals to survive as a mutual benefit. Now this is kind of neat. We can learn so much from creation, even in how animals defend themselves. Turns out there's a couple kind of insects that bacteria do not go after. Their wings are almost bacteria-free. Now this made scientists very, very curious. One of them is a katydid. A more common one is a dragonfly. They have very translucent wings covered with a kind of a clear, scaly kind of stuff. So scientists thought, as they were looking for bacteria, and they noticed, wow, they're like they've had an antibiotic, stuff put on the wings. Where's all the bacteria? They started looking closer with an electron microscope. What they found were the surface of this wings has incredibly small, nanometer-sized spikes, billions of them sticking up on the wing. So a bacteria comes along, he lands here, and he's going to sort of start to work his way across and try to work his way into the dragonfly or the katydid. But instead, his kind of flexible body starts to sink down into the bed of nails, to the point he gets punctured and he dies. So it's an antibiotic surface without chemicals.
That's amazing.
Isn't that cool? I mean, this is what's happening. The bacteria lands, he starts to sink. As he sinks lower and lower, and by the way, some of these will flex, but others will puncture, and once punctured, the bacteria dies.
Well, what antiseptic companies wouldn't give to be able to do something like this?
They are working on it. Right now, this is a fairly recent development. Companies are looking at what God has made and saying, how can we use it? And they're starting, think of hospitals with doorknobs and all sorts of surfaces and walls where you don't have to wipe them down. They have a natural antibiotic surface.
That would
be
very
cool.
Life-saving for many places.
Let's go to the ocean now. There's 1,000 different varieties of these beautiful flower-like creatures called sea anemones. Okay, now what these guys have are built-in weapons. They eat by attracting a fish. A fish comes swimming along. If it even brushes up against the edge of these tentacles, look like petals of a flower, they get shot with a little artillery, like a little barbed spear. It paralyzes them, and then the tentacles grab around it, and the sea anemone eats the fish. All right, that's how it survives. It's got to get food. The fallen world preys one on another to get food, and it eats fish. All right, so that's the sea anemone. How did it develop its artillery? Now let's think about this. Inside of those little tentacles, there are hundreds of thousands of these things called nematocysts. And they're like little bundles of coiled spring with a little arrow that has barbs on end, and then a little trigger. A fish touches the trigger, and it comes shooting out there attached to a thread. And then the poison comes up through the thread and goes into the fish. Okay? If you just had the barb without the thread, it wouldn't be any good. If you just had the barb without the spring, it wouldn't shoot out. If you didn't have the trigger, it wouldn't know to shoot out or when to shoot out. See, without the barb, without the thread, without the poison, without the spring, without the trigger, none of it's any good. It's like a cannon. You've got to have the cannonball, you've got to have the gunpowder, you've got to have the pipe. It's all got to be there or nothing does any good.
And as it's doing this to get food to eat, which it needs to survive, what did it do? How did it eat? How did it survive before it developed this?
Exactly. If it was surviving perfectly fine without this, where did the programming come and why would it develop? And if it needed it to survive, how did it survive before it was developed? But even more importantly, how do you get all the parts there all at once? Because with just one of the parts, it does nothing.
You would need this creature to be a whole creature, the way the Bible describes creation, that God made each creature according to its kind.
Exactly. And fully functional, fully developed. See, the evidence is there. It is, are we seeking for the truth of where it came from? Or were you just assuming it made itself? And that's what evolution does. They'll make up stories of what could have happened, but the fossil record doesn't show any slow development. But it gets even more amazing because, as I said, how could a creature make weapons? But when it uses its weapons, the weapon regenerates itself. Wouldn't the military love that? How does it? There's no regenerating ammunition except in things God has made.
So this never runs out of bullets, is what you're saying.
Never runs out of bullets. Never runs out of bullets.
That would be useful for our military.
But it gets even funner. Because here you have a fish that just loves to live amongst the sea anemones. We've all seen Finding Nemo. You know, he lived among the sea anemones because he somehow developed an immunity. And when he touches these, the sea anemone knows it doesn't even need to waste its weapon on it. He's got some sort of a triggering mechanism on his skin that tells the sea anemone, hey, I'm a friend, don't eat me, and he doesn't get shot.
So he triggers the trigger on the anemone,
but
and
it
then
doesn't go off.
It doesn't go off
Right.
because it knows all of this.
It's a chemical identification marker. How could it know that? See, God put them there. God put these things there so we'll know the truth. But it gets even cooler, okay? Because now we have other creatures who say, whoa, that sea anemone's got this cool weapon. I wish I had that weapon. So this boxer crab comes and snips off little pieces of the sea anemone, like 2 pom-poms, and now he goes around and he'll use them to kill other fish with them.
How does he snip them off of the creature without dying himself?
God built it into him. But he's not the only one. We have sea slugs. Now these guys they're beautiful in a way, but they're just kind of weird. They're just kind of crawling along the ocean floor, really, really colorful. They often have these very frilly things on their back. There's a picture of one of them. Here's a completely different kind of sea slug. Notice these long appendages. Now all sorts of fish and sea creatures love these because they move around slow and they don't really have any way to defend themselves. They're like a big bowl of jelly, except they need to defend themselves or they're all going to get eaten. So they go up and they start eating parts of the sea anemone. They digest the entire animal except for these little weapon modules. They have special channels and tubes where when they eat the sea anemone, all of the netioclasts, they come floating along up into the end of these appendages. So they've stolen the artillery from the sea anemone, and now they can use them in their own bodies.
So they know not to digest them. They know to eat them. They know
not
to digest them. And then their body figures out how to use them.
And they know how to transport them, and they've got all the tubes and the mechanism to transport them, and then they're way out there at the end. I mean, how did they even know it needed protection? Once it's eaten, it's gone. I mean, it just somehow did. How did the first one survive when swallowing a poisonous sea anemone? It couldn't have happened. It would have been dead. How did it know it needed to make this fluffy tail that was hollow that allowed weapons to come up to the end of its tail so it could protect itself using the sea anemone's weapons? See, none of this makes sense. And how does the tail make an opening to allow the stolen weapons to now shoot? It's all design. Totally different, independent creatures using pieces and parts of the design of a completely different creature.
You know, that's really the thing, too. All these creatures having, again, to work together, but they're not allowed to know that there's other creatures or other things to function with, and then randomly changing and then developing and passing on changes. Bruce, it boggles the mind. Unfortunately, we're going to have to stop for a moment. I want to pick it up right where we left off, but we need to take a break. So we'll be back right after these messages.
We hope you're enjoying Origins TV. It all started at Cornerstone Television in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We've been producing new episodes for over 37 years now. We praise God for the success of the program and are excited to introduce you to Origins and to us. If you're interested in watching more episodes of Origins, you can find them on our YouTube page. Simply go to YouTube and search Cornerstone Television Network. Click the like and subscribe buttons, then you'll find the best episodes of Origins in our playlist. You can also visit our website at ctvn.org/origins. One more way you can stay connected with us is to subscribe to our free monthly Hope Today newsletter, which you can do from our website. And if you have any questions, call us here at Cornerstone Television at 888-665-4483. We'd love to connect with you. Thank you for watching.
Welcome back to Origins. We're talking to Bruce Malone, who's been sharing about incredible features of God's creatures. Bruce, do you have any other creatures for us to look at?
One last category that just absolutely disproves evolution is the idea of things that are complex have multiple parts, and they're irreducibly complex. You can't take away one of the parts and they'll work. Throughout the natural biological world, there are millions, if not billions, of examples of features that, if they're not there, the creature dies, nothing works. I'm just going to look at one because I love this one. The peregrine falcon is the fastest animal on Earth.
Oh, wow.
When it dives, it moves at 200 miles per hour in its dive. It just has all of these design features that allow it to function. It can see its prey from a mile off. It has 5 times the number of retina cells from a human being. It has like a pair of goggles, because when you're moving at 200 miles an hour, you literally have so much wind in your eye you can't see. So it puts down a third eyelid membrane that it can see through, and it keeps it from drying out, and it can still see. And it has just incredible flight control. I mean, it can spot a rabbit from a mile up, go into a dive 200 miles an hour, and hit it like a pinpoint target, exploding it into a ball of fluff.
Wow.
Throwing up its wings at the last minute and sending out its claws. But what I want to talk about is its breathing adaptation. Because at 200 miles an hour, it's got these little holes in its beak, has to keep its beak shut or it's going to be like a parachute slowing it down. But there's so much turbulence at that speed, the air is not going into its lungs. And it can't survive at those speeds. So here is a peregrine falcon in dive. I mean, it tucks its wings back, folds them back, becomes a missile that's shooting down to catch its prey. Amazing bird. At the last minute, it throws its wings out, sends its claws out, and wham! Grabs a duck right out of the water, a rabbit off the ground, banks back up, and takes off.
Amazing.
It's an amazing appearance of nature. But here's what I want to talk about. This is its nose right here. You'll notice it has a big opening right here that allows the air to come in, but at that speed, the air is being deflected away from that opening. It's not getting enough air. So what does it do? Dies. There's no reason to move at those speeds without being able to breathe. It can't breathe if it's moving at those speeds. It's a paradigm. How did it ever get around this? Turns out at the very center of that nose, there is a little round bone. You can see it there. I've drawn to it.
Yes.
That disturbs the turbulence so air will flow in. Now, airplane designers had the same problem. When we went from prop planes to jet planes are moving so fast, especially as they approach and exceed the speed of sound, the air is moving away from the intake to the jet engines. It's not flowing through them, and the jet engines don't work. Guess what they did to allow jet engines to function? They looked at the peregrine falcon. They looked at the little bone in the middle of the circle that allows air into this bird's lungs. And they started designing jet airplane engines with a little circular cone in the middle.
How
Without
about
that cone, a jet engine would not function at high speeds. Without that cone, a peregrine falcon could not fly.
And no one would ever say that that engine developed itself, created itself, and yet they say, many of them would say that, well, it did with the
bird
falcon.
did it by random mutational changes. It's total foolishness when you look at the two designs and the two different concepts. You see, this is what God tells us. Ask the beasts and they shall teach you. This is out of the book of Job. The birds of the heavens and they will tell you. The bushes of the earth they will teach you. The fish of the sea will declare of you. Notice the last sentence. Who among all of these things does not know the hand of the Lord has done this? It is so clear that we have a creator, and God makes it emphatically clear.
Seems like, Bruce, we really do know it, but we don't want to acknowledge it.
As Adam and Eve sinned, he hid from God. Evolution is a story that allows us to hide from God and pretend he's been billions of years in the past or he doesn't exist at all.
That's a great note to end the show on. Bruce, I want to thank you for being on the program today, and I want to thank you for joining us. We look today at the creation itself. What does it say about itself? Does it say that it was produced randomly through mutations and through time, or does the creation itself, with its complexity, with things like defense mechanisms and weapons, does it demand an intelligent creator? Well, it just goes to show you once again that we really do know that what the Bible says is true. And the proof, well, it's all around you. If you enjoy Origins, we sure could use your help to keep this Creation TV program on the air. Your support, both prayerfully and financially, make a big impact. So let's work together and reveal how awesome our Creator is. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching this edition of Origins. For a DVD of this series, you can order online or send a $12 donation to cover shipping and handling and write to Origins Program number 2204, Cornerstone Network, Wall, Pennsylvania, 15148.
This presentation was made possible by the faithful prayers and financial support of you, our Cornerstone family.